Hey everyone, Howie Fisher with Precision Fly Fishing in Mount Holly Springs, Pennsylvania. And today I'm tying up a classic Pennsylvania fly, the Letort Hopper, developed on the Letort Spring Creek. For the hook today, I'm using a tactical big bug hook in size 12 from Fulling Mill. This is a brand new hook from them. For the thread, I'm using UTC 140 denier in yellow. And I'm going to go ahead and get started with my thread a little bit behind the hook eye. I want to give myself a little bit of room to finish the fly without crowding it. Once I've got my thread secure, I'll go ahead and snip it off, and then I'm going to bring my thread immediately pretty well into the bend and let my thread hang. And I'm going to grab my first material, which here I'm using Hareline Dubbin in yellow. This is just a regular Hareline Dubbin. Any yellow dubbing that is suitable for dry flies will do here. The original pattern just calls for yellow dubbing. So the Hareline Dubbin in yellow is what I had, so that's what I'm going to go ahead and use. I'm going to create a pretty thick dubbing noodle, and I'm going to go ahead and probably take 2 or 3 times to get this done, but I want to build up a little bit of a body, as you can see here. And as I mentioned, I'm probably going to take at least another 1 or 2 noodles to get this just right where I want it. This fly was developed on, like I said, Letort Spring here in the Cumberland Valley in central Pennsylvania, south central Pennsylvania, back in the early 60s, and has been fished at least countrywide, if not worldwide, ever since then. So once I've got this dubbing body where I want it, I'm going to go ahead and grab my next material, which is turkey feather. What I've done here is I have coated this in Solarez Flex Bone Flex Dry. This is a newer material from Solarez. We are carrying this in the shop now, so you can get it from our website. And what I've done is I've prepped this feather ahead of time, and I've coated the entire thing in this Bone Flex Dry, so that way I can just use it for flies like this whenever I need. So I'm going to go ahead and take a generous portion. I'm going to snip the end off square, or the base off square, and then I'm going to taper the end here to make it look just a little bit more natural, as you can see here. And then I'm going to go ahead and measure this about a hook shank or a body shank, body length and a half long. So as you can see, really the key here is making sure that it's extending past the body. And once I get it where I want it, then I'm going to go ahead and take a couple more wraps to get it secure. And next I'm going to grab my wing on this fly, which is, here I'm using Select Cow Elk from Nature's Spirit. You can use elk, pretty much any elk or deer hair, whatever you prefer. Select Cow Elk is just my preferred hair, general hair for attractor patterns or terrestrials. It's a pretty good all-around hair for multi-purpose. So I'm going to go ahead and stack this, and again I'm using Select Cow Elk. And once I get this stacked, and I'm only going to stack this first portion because I'm going to tie this in and create a little bit of a wing with the tips. So I'm going to make this about the same length as the body, underbody. And I'm going to go ahead and tie this in and snip off those butt ends. There's 2 ways to tie this part in. If you'd like, you can leave those butt ends and just start tying in the rest of the fly. I prefer to tie it in and cut them off, just personal preference. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do essentially the same process. I'm going to go ahead and tie in 2 to 3 clumps of elk hair with the tips cut off. And all I'm doing in this section, or the rest of this head, is essentially spinning the elk hair. So I'm going to clear out the fuzzy under fibers. I'm going to snip the tips off, like I said, and then I'm going to bring 2 wraps, and then I'm going to spin that elk hair around. And once I've got it where I want it, push all these fibers back, and bring my thread in front of all these. And in the process, pushing those clumps back to really stack this hair in here. Use 2 to 3 depending on the hook that you're using or the size that you're using, but the more you can fit on this head, the better, because it's just going to mean that this fly is going to float even better. So again, I'm going to go ahead and prep another clump of this elk hair, pulling out all the under fur and the shorts and snipping off the tip ends. Snipping off the tip ends isn't key or isn't crucial, but it does help when you come to trim. You know what is the actual head of the fly versus that wing. Again, going to repeat the same process. So I'm going to take 2 looser wraps, then pull tight and push back to pack this hair in. I had some fibers pop out on me there, so I'm going to go ahead and do a 3rd stack, plus I've got room for it anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and make that 3rd stack just a little bit bigger to fill in that gap. Again, just repeating the same process, cleaning the fibers out, or the under fur, and clipping off the tips of the hair. And once again, I'm going to pull these fibers back, and I'm going to go ahead and give this 2 looser wraps and then pull tight straight up and start spinning that hair. And this should do it on this fly. I'm going to go ahead and again push those fibers back and bring my thread in front of this last clump. And you can play with this a little bit. You can push this back so you have a little bit more room to finish the fly. But again, once you've got it where you want it, you can go ahead and whip finish. If you have the room to build up a little bit more of a head, like I'm doing right here, it'll naturally push those fibers back, and it'll make whip finishing a little bit easier if you have that room. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a 3, 4, 5 turn whip finish, snip my thread. Really only need 1 whip finish because I'm going to go ahead and hit it with some Solarez bone dry just to seal in those wraps, make sure they're not going anywhere, make sure they're not going to come undone. I did get a little bit of Solarez bone dry in the eye, so I'm just going to try and clean it out, or even leave that hook in there while I cure it. And once I have that cured, next comes pretty much really the last part of this fly, which is the haircut. You can get super carried away with this. I'm using a double-edged razor blade here. Got to be careful when using these. They're super sharp and they can cut you really easily. But again, you can get carried away really easily with this part. My recommendation is make it look nice, make it look good, tight, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Truthfully, at the end of the day, the fish aren't going to care if one hair is sticking out a little bit more, a couple hairs sticking out a little bit more. You know, if it doesn't look completely perfect, like some of the pictures do, so on and so forth. You can really drive yourself crazy if you take too much time trying to perfect this. Another rule of thumb that I like to go by, and I don't always follow this, sometimes I get myself in trouble, but go wide first. So take a couple really wide swaths, cutting off a little bit more, and then start getting a little bit more specific. You can always cut off more, but once you cut it off, you can't add it back. And like I said, sometimes I get myself in trouble. You know, after I've gotten, 2 or 3 of these down, I think, oh man, I can get this. And then I, cut way too much off of it, and I screwed that last one up. But yeah, again, make it look good. You want to be confident in the flies you're fishing, but it doesn't need to be completely perfect. One thing to keep in mind, though, is you definitely want that yellow underbody showing. That's kind of one of the key pattern parts of this pattern, is that yellow underbody. So just make sure you trim any fur or fibers that are under the body. And this wing ended up a little bit long after I started pushing those fibers back, so I'm going to go ahead and come in and just make it a little bit shorter. And then come back to trimming this head. I really like a pair of curved scissors for this. Definitely helps with the tapering aspect of this, of really cutting hair on any portion or any type of fly like this. And I like to come in here at the very end and actually trim the back side of those furs. It just rounds the head a little bit more. And then come in and make sure there's no fibers around the eye of the hook that are going to get clogged or anything like that. But again, there you have it. This is the Letort Hopper. The most difficult part of this fly is doing and trimming the head. But tie them up, fish them, let us know what you think, and hopefully they treat you well.